Coming up on KCCI 8 News Close Up, presidential candidates try to break the deadlock in the final stretch of the race for the White House. Key takeaways from their first face-to-face meeting. Candidates in Iowa's 1st Congressional District are firing off accusations against their opponent in new TV ads. We're checking the facts. And Deidre DeGier says she's ready to run with the torch passed on by a longtime leader of the Oak Ridge neighborhood. She shares her plans to lead the state's largest affordable housing community.
This is Iowa's news leader. This is KCCI 8 News Close Up.
Good morning and welcome to KCCI 8 News Close Up. I'm Chief Political Reporter Amanda Rooker. Well, less than 2 months before the presidential election, Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump met for the first time on a debate stage in Philadelphia. 67 million people tuned in to that ABC debate, blowing past the 51 million who watched the June debate between President Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Tuesday's debate started with a handshake. Then things quickly got heated as the two tried to make their case to voters.
You're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me.
Vice President Kamala Harris made that point again and again Tuesday night as she met former President Donald Trump for the first time.
Kamala Harris, let's have a good debate.
In a fiery Philadelphia debate with the dueling rivals trying to break the deadlock in the final 2 months of the race for the White House.
She is Biden, the worst inflation we've ever had. A horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country.
Harris baiting Trump on the size of his rallies.
People start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom.
His criminal cases.
I think this is so rich, coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault,
and relationships with foreign allies.
World leaders are laughing at Donald Trump.
Trump took that bait, rattled by Harris as he leveled a series of unfounded claims.
People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
The former president criticizing Harris's attempts to run as an agent of change while also being part of President Biden's administration, especially on the economy.
She's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else.
What we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess.
And on the border.
I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar, remember that.
Harris hitting her stride on a signature issue, reproductive rights.
The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body.
They have abortion in the 9th month.
That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America.
Harris also addressing the war in Gaza, walking a thin line of support for allies and trying not to fracture a fragile democratic coalition.
Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end.
Then there was the war over rhetoric.
Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. I think the American people want better than that, want better than this.
Trump still falsely claiming he won the 2020 election.
There's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it.
And refusing to answer this about January 6th.
Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech.
Harris made a direct appeal to Republicans or independents who believe Trump has gone too far.
We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you.
Now, it's unlikely that the two will debate again before the election. Harris said immediately after Tuesday's debate that she's on board for a second one, but Trump has ruled it out, posting on social media that there will not be another debate. The Iowa GOP says Trump outlined his vision to put America first and reverse what has been done by the Harris-Biden administration. Iowa Democratic Party Chair Rita Hart released a statement saying, quote, Harris made it clear that she will create a positive path for every Iowan by lowering taxes, cutting grocery prices, and expanding affordable housing. Iowa college students getting ready to vote in the November election also paid close attention at Drake University. Democrats are meeting on campus to engage students ahead of the election, encouraging them to register to vote. College Republicans at Iowa State University are offering one-on-one discussions for anyone who wants to learn more and inviting students to club meetings. Both groups are sharing their thoughts on Tuesday's debate.
Kamala won. She was able to get a lot of her policy points across and show the difference between her and Trump.
I thought that President Trump really did kind of win. He really showed his vision for the economy well. He showed his vision for immigration well.
The young voters say this election could be the most important of their lifetime. Well, 3 Iowa Libertarian candidates are starting a write-in campaign. That's after the state Supreme Court upheld the decision to remove them from the ballot. The state Supreme Court's decision came down late on Wednesday, but it comes after a decision last month from the state objections panel. Republican leaders challenged the Libertarian Party of Iowa's nominating process. The panel voted 2-1 that the party did not follow state law during the nomination process. The 3 candidates appealed in district court, then appealed again when that court's decision came down. Senator Joni Ernst recently returned from leading a delegation across the Middle East. That marks her 4th trip to the region since the October 7th attacks in Israel last year. Ernst traveled with U.S. Representatives Jim Banks of Indiana, John Curtis of Utah, and Iowa's Marionette Miller Meeks to help move forward a deal that ensures both the survival of Israel and brings the American hostages home. The delegation met with Prime Minister Netanyahu in Israel. It also met in Jordan with King Abdullah II to discuss deterring Iranian aggression. It also stopped in Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Qatar. Senator Ernst shared with me the most memorable part of the trip for her was hearing from the families of the hostages.
When I traveled to Israel, we had dinner with the families of the hostages. And once again, to hear their stories, their thoughts, and then try and share those thoughts as I moved throughout the region. And so it was heartbreaking because I was sitting there right beside John and Rachel, who are Hirsch Goldberg Poland's parents, and visiting with them and the hope that they had for the safe return of their son. And then only a few days after that, then to learn that Hirsch had been murdered by Hamas deep in a tunnel within Gaza. It's just truly heartbreaking for these families. We still have 4 presumed alive Americans and the bodies of 3 additional Americans that are being held by Hamas. And I know that their families are on this extreme roller coaster of emotions, hopeful one day and devastated the next. So it is incredibly important that our federal government, including Vice President Kamala Harris and President Joe Biden, pressure Iran and Hamas to get these hostages home to their families.
And later in this show, we'll hear from Senator Ernst on the Farm Bill and when she predicts it could move forward. Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds is currently on a 10-day trade mission to India. The delegation joining her includes IEDA and the Iowa Finance Authority Director, Debbie Durham, Iowa Secretary of Agriculture, Mike Naig, and agricultural and business leaders from across our state. The purpose of the mission is to work towards strengthening Iowa's trade and investment relationships with India. On the second day of her trade mission, Reynolds gave the keynote address at the U.S.-India Business Council's India Ideas Summit. She told the audience that she knows Iowa is at its strongest when we forge long-term global relationships. Still to come on Close Up, getting the facts on new political ads in Iowa's 1st congressional district race, the claims being made about the rise in grocery prices, and a vote on Iowa's abortion ban. In a new TV ad, Republican Congresswoman Mariannette Miller Meeks is linking high prices at the grocery store to presidential policies. Her ad shows her in the grocery store blaming those high prices on the Biden-Harris administration. The price jumps in the ad are true. KCCI found the price of eggs has doubled since 2021. The cost of bread and ground beef is up by more than 25%. But when it comes to what's causing those rising prices, we found it's not that simple.
In her TV ad, Miller Meeks is campaigning on household costs, targeting Washington Democrats.
Do you want to know how to decide your vote this year? Just look in your grocery cart.
The Biden-Harris economic policies doubled the price of eggs.
We wanted to know whether her claims were true, so we talked with Dr. Chad Hart. He's a professor of economics at Iowa State University.
I'm going to argue the biggest factors have nothing to do with politics.
In other words, there are a lot of factors driving up the cost of groceries.
Does the president have control over food prices?
They wish. In this case, they do not.
Hart says forces impacting each food market has much more influence than government policy. For example, the price of eggs has doubled since 2021, mostly because of a widespread outbreak of bird flu.
That has, reduced those flocks of animals that can produce those eggs, limiting egg supplies. And when egg supplies are small, prices rise. And so it's more about high path avian influenza than anything else when it comes to the price of eggs we're seeing now.
And why does hamburger meat cost so much more? In part, a drought across the western U.S.
Those cattle herds out west had to get smaller. That means you have fewer cattle, which means you have less beef available. And again, low supplies tend to lead to very high prices.
The U.S. Government Accountability Office also points to the COVID-19 pandemic. They say as people, quote, shifted away from full-service restaurant meals, they purchased more foods at grocery stores. There were slowdowns in production at meat processing plants when workers became sick and plants shut down. And that, quote, the war in Ukraine also disrupted the global supply of agricultural commodities, such as wheat, corn, sunflower oil, and fertilizer. Hart says inflation and rising wages have also played a role.
Everything else is going up in price. Food has to go up in price because food has to move with the general economy. If wages are going up, those wages add to the cost of moving that food through the supply chain to the grocery store.
Bottom line, the ad doesn't paint a full picture.
That's not to say that policies can't influence grocery store prices, but they tend to have very small influence on those prices.
I also asked Dr. Hart if corporate price gouging has played a role. He says that has had little influence on those high prices. Well, Democrat Christina Bohannon is running against the Republican incumbent in Iowa's 1st District. Now, there has been a lot of claims about Iowa's abortion ban since it took effect in July, and Bohannon is targeting Miller Meeks over that state law, even though Miller Meeks never voted for it.
Democrat Christina Bohannon's latest TV ad starts with a reference to Iowa's current abortion policy, banning the procedure after cardiac activity is detected. Doctors say that's usually around 6 weeks of pregnancy.
Iowa now has one of the strictest abortion bans in the country because of Mariannette Miller Meeks.
This isn't true. Miller Meeks did not vote for Iowa's current abortion law. She wasn't in the state legislature when it passed in 2023 or in 2018. She was elected to the Iowa Senate in 2019. When she ran for Congress in 2020, Miller Meeks did express support for the abortion ban, telling the Iowa City Press-Citizen that she, quote, championed Governor Kim Reynolds' priorities, including her, quote, fetal heartbeat bill. The ad then makes another claim.
She's pushing to ban all abortions nationwide with no exceptions for rape or incest.
In March, we asked Miller Meeks for her stance on abortion.
I'm pro-life with exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother.
In 2021, Miller Meeks did co-sponsor a bill guaranteeing a right to life from the moment of fertilization without any exceptions. Some interpret that policy as a total abortion ban, although it does not specifically mention abortion. But Miller Meeks did not sign on to the 2023 version of that bill. After the U.S. Supreme Court overturned federal abortion rights in 2022, Miller Meeks told KCCI she now believes abortion policy should be up to the states, not Congress.
After the overturn of Roe v. Wade, the role belongs to the states, and that helps us to bring it back closer to the people, and it helps force that conversation among individuals.
Christina Bohannon responded in a statement writing that she will continue holding Miller Meeks accountable for her extreme and dangerous anti-abortion record, end quote.
This is a beacon of hope, not just for this community, but for our entire community.
Next, a vision for a diverse neighborhood to expand help and hope to more than just its residents.
Her care for our community is wrapped into every policy, wrapped into every goal, wrapped into the vision of this organization. She cared so deeply about seeing people thrive and seeing people succeed, and that torch must not dim.
Terry Caldwell Johnson spent her entire career in public service, leading the Oak Ridge neighborhood as president and CEO for 20 years until she passed away in March. Deidre DeGier knows she has big shoes to fill when she takes over that position in October. I talked to DeGier about her plans to lead the state's largest affordable housing community she's set to take over in the middle of next month. The organization was founded more than 50 years ago, and since then, it's provided housing and services for more than 20,000 families. The neighborhood works to provide a safe place for their diverse community. Oak Ridge also provides daycare and after-school programs for kids, ages ranging from infants all the way through 12th grade students. And they also offer workforce development training for adults. As of last year, the community had more than 700 residents, and more than half of those were under the age of 18. DeGier calls the community a beacon of hope and says she's ready to get to work.
What some don't understand is that the services that Oak Ridge offers are not only for Oak Ridge neighborhood residents, but it's for the entire community. And so it's one that is really focused on the pathway to economic success, really touching people at every point in life, trying to fulfill their needs and contribute to what their American dream is going to be. The big vision that I have is one, living out the vision of this organization. They have spent an incredible amount of time working on a strategic plan that spans across the next 10 years for this organization. What that vision looks like is expanding beyond the acreage at Oak Ridge and really emphasizing the services that it offers to more residents across this community. That's one thing that's key. One, I also want to make sure that people understand that this is a beacon of hope, not just for this community, but for our entire community. So anything that happens here is a stamp on the success of what's happening in this state. There's so many good people who work here. I'm incredibly excited to work with the staff, to work with the team, but more importantly, I'm excited to get to know the residents in this space as well. One thing that I really am leaning into is home ownership. We have a great deal of residents who are in a position where they can purchase a home, and likely enough, that's a part of the strategic plan for this organization as well. And so the gifts and desires that I have as an individual to really lean into people's personal economic development and their goals is going to happen right here on site, and I'm really excited to see that bloom in this organization. The work that happens here is really providing a platform for people to elevate from and to be successful. When we talk about housing, this organization provides housing. Needless to say, people have goals and dreams beyond the walls of Oak Ridge, and so it's incredibly important that we set individuals up for success, whatever that path looks like for them. These are Iowans that live here. These are folks who live in Des Moines, who are working in Des Moines, who are contributing to their communities. And what this organization offers is an opportunity to help them at every point and step where there's a question, where there's a concern, where there's difficulty in navigation, because we all have challenges. Not everybody's willing to ask for help. Not everybody is in a position to get that help, and this organization is right there to meet their needs at every point. Oak Ridge is more than just a home. It is a beacon of hope for our community, and it's an opportunity for folks to thrive and folks to get engaged in a way that they've never gotten engaged before. I can remember when I didn't work for this organization where people would ask me, I'm having difficulty finding childcare. I don't have kids myself, but I know beyond a shadow of a doubt everything that I know about this organization. I would tell them, send your kids to Oak Ridge. They're going to get a meaningful experience. They're going to get an opportunity to experience diversity in thought. They're going to get an opportunity to experience diversity in culture. This is an organization that I firmly believe is a true representation of what opportunity looks like and really fulfilling that pathway to opportunity.
DeGier owns and runs a consulting business. She also ran for governor as a Democrat in 2022. Still to come on Close Up, why the next farm bill is still hung up in Congress and what needs to happen to get it across the finish line. Welcome back to Close Up. Iowa farmers are still waiting for the next farm bill. The sweeping piece of legislation covers things including the SNAP program, disaster aid, and agricultural subsidies. Now, it's supposed to be passed every 5 years, and it gives Congress an opportunity to rework programs. But the current one expired last year, and the one-year extension expires at the end of the month. Iowa Senator Joni Ernst says as she visits counties across the state, the number one question she hears right now is, when is that farm bill going to get done?
I'm very pessimistic that it gets over the finish line this fall. I would anticipate that in the spring, after the election is over, we take up the farm bill yet once again. Right now, the Senate Democrats, that's where the hang up is in the Senate. Senate Democrats, who have the majority, would rather focus on cryptocurrency than focus on the farm bill, as evidenced by a number of our most recent committee hearings. So until they decide to actually bring the farm bill forward, have active discussions on it in committee, we're not going to see it move forward. I want to thank G.T. Thompson, the Republican chair in the House, for actually getting a bipartisan bill through the committee. I think that was an important step. But we don't see the Senate Democrats have the same urgency in getting a bill done here in the United States Senate. So again, I know my farmers really want some answers, and I would like those answers as well. But until the Democrats decide to move on the farm bill, we won't have those questions answered.
Last month, Senate Democrats pushed back. The Agricultural Committee chairwoman said that according to congressional budget reports, the House Republican proposal is not paid for. And to reach a bipartisan agreement, we need to have real negotiation on how to pay for our investments in the farm bill. Quote, to do that, Republican colleagues need to join me at the negotiating table in a serious way. If we work together, I know we can finish our work, but we're running out of time. Thanks for joining us for KCCI 8 News Close Up. Have a great day.